Lo and behold, the first result when I search in my model number is my watch.
The first result.
Within like 20 minutes after my mediator logged on, so about 10 a.m. in America, they banned his account. Like,
The response was, "You, sir, are full of shit." I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted criminal, now good guy, and host of Criminal Thoughts. In today's world, criminals come in all shapes and sizes, but they all have one thing in common. They all have criminal thoughts. On today's episode, we're talking about fraud during the holiday season, and I've got an anonymous guest coming on that's going to share his story with us and how it might pertain to you. And as you can see, I'm dressed for the holiday season. Howdy ho, howdy ho. I've got my Clark Griswold jersey on. I've got the Randy Quaid hat on. I'm feeling festive. Festive for fraud on today's episode of Criminal Thoughts. Now, before we get started with that, let's check in with my producer, Brian, to see what he's got for us.
Thanks, Brett. This first story this week is coming from your neck of the woods again. 2 officers, 5 civilians arrested at Georgia state prisons for possession of contraband. The Georgia Department of Corrections announced their ongoing battle against contraband inside and outside of state prisons has led to multiple arrests in the month of November. Items such as drones, tobacco, marijuana, guns, and cell phones were found being smuggled by the officers and civilians.
All right, so contraband in prison. As my viewers may know, I have served significant prison time. Not as much as some guys, but more than a lot of guys. Contraband in prison. I'm glad that this article pointed out that guards smuggle a lot of the contraband in. I would say that guards are responsible for well over 85% of the contraband that comes in there. To give you an idea of how much some of these things go, and I'm talking about in federal prison. A cell phone, that $40 cell phone that you pick up at Walmart, that prepaid one that's $40 at Walmart, that's $1,000 behind the fence. A carton of cigarettes, $1,000. $1,000. If you take a chapstick lid and you fill that with marijuana, that's $25. A single cigarette is $8. That's the prices of contraband in prison. So if you're a guard and you're not paid a lot of money, you can make a lot of money by bringing in illegal things for the prisoners that are there. It is not surprising that that happens. My advice on how to curtail that and mitigate that problem is, hey, pay and train the prison guards a little bit more, because they're obviously not being paid enough. They really don't make much money at all. That being said, hey, the people who are caught, put them in prison. Give them a taste of what life is like behind the fence. Maybe they'll choose to do the right thing at the end of the day. Brian?
Okay, Brett, we're going to Florida again, where Florida man, infamous Florida man, involved in a $1 million tax fraud scheme has been sentenced to 2 years in prison. Rafael Ramos of Orlando pleaded guilty to aiding and assisting in the preparation of false tax returns. According to court documents, Ramos recruited clients and prepared tax returns on their behalf that claimed financial institutions had withheld large amounts of taxes from their incomes, entitling them to refunds from the IRS. When the IRS tried to collect fraudulently issued refunds, Ramos instructed his clients to move their funds out of the bank to avoid IRS levies. Back to you, Brett.
Well, here we go. Tax fraud. And again, for anyone who knows my history, you know that I'm the guy that the reason your all's tax returns are delayed every single year is this funnily dressed guy in front of you right now. I'm the guy that created that tax return identity theft. The reason that fraudsters look at the government sector for fraud is because it's easy. because the government typically doesn't put the right security in place. The people who are in charge, they figure it's not their money. They don't really care about it, so they're not really worried about the fraud that's coming in. That's the truth of the matter. When I was doing tax fraud, I would I got to where I was able to file manually one tax return every 6 minutes. I would typically file 180 of these things a week and then take a road trip for two of those days of the week and cash out, pull money out of ATMs. This guy is really no different than what I was doing. He was doing it. He was assisting people in committing fraud. We see that in the government sector, whether it be the IRS, whether it be SNAP benefits, whether it be FEMA or stimulus fraud or Medicaid, Medicare fraud, what have you. And it's a huge issue because these days most fraudsters online look at the government sector first as a place to profit from. And it's going to continue to get worse. And at the end of the day, the people who pay for that, it's not Congress, it's not government that pays for that. It's people like you and me. On today's episode of Criminal Thoughts, we've got an anonymous Reddit user coming to visit us, and he's going to talk about the type of fraud that he got hit with. His screen name is 4K1 over on Reddit. Now, before we bring him in, I want to talk about some of the types of fraud, one specific type of fraud that takes place not only during Christmas season, but throughout the entire year. And that fraud is called refunding fraud. Back in 2013, on the dark web, this criminal marketplace called Evolution Market, we started to see individuals coming in and they were posting that they were making $10,000 a month doing Amazon refunds. And the collective group on the marketplace, the response was, "You, sir, are full of shit." Well, it turns out they were not full of shit. They were making $10,000 plus per month doing Amazon refunds. And the way it worked back then, you would sign up for a Prime free trial. You would use your card, your name, your address. You would order something like a MacBook Pro. Amazon would ship it to you. It would arrive 2 days later. They'd leave it on your doorstep. You'd get on the phone. You'd call Amazon. "Hey, I didn't get it." Amazon would send you another one. It would arrive 2 days later. You'd get on the phone, get Amazon on. "Hey, I didn't get that one either." And Amazon would then give you a refund. So you would end up with 2 laptops and your money back. It wasn't just laptops. It was cell phones. It was 70-inch televisions. It was living room couches. It was everything across the board. That is where refunding fraud began. Now, that type of fraud actually redefines cybercrime as we know it today, because what used to happen for aspiring cyber criminals, some newbie that just read some article someplace and he wanted to make a lot of money, he would come on the dark web. He would get stolen credit card details and he would try to defraud, Apple or Sony or Microsoft for laptops, and he would fail miserably because that requires a degree of skill. That's not the way it works anymore. Today, what happens is these fraudsters come and start immediately with refunding fraud, and they immediately start to profit. And as they profit, as they're actually making money, they learn how to commit other types of fraud as well. Now, I wanted to preface that and explain this before 4K1, the Reddit user, comes in and tells us his story. So I'm an avid Reddit reader. I read it all the time. I'm subscribed to many different subreddits. Some of them even talk about me and hate me. Some of them like me even. That being said, I'm a watch guy too. I have over 20 watches myself. I love the things. I think they're great works of art, great timepieces. I'm more of a tool type watch guy myself, so divers watches, things like that. I was perusing the watches subreddit, and the user 4K1 posted his story about how this individual tried to defraud him. So at this point, I'm going to bring user 4K1 from Reddit over, and he's going to share his story with us. 4K1, how are you today? I'm doing all right. Hey, first of all, I want to thank you, and truly I mean this. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. I really do appreciate it. And I read your story, and it was really bothering to me, not only what you went through, but also what the website Chrono24 attempted to do. And I use Chrono24. So if you could just walk through what happened, I would really appreciate that.
Firstly, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. I think this is an important story to be told because Chrono24, everyone seems to think it's a bulletproof, safe platform. I did too. I've transacted on it multiple times.
Right.
But to get to the story, essentially what happened is I listed a watch, a pretty high dollar value watch on Chrono24 in February. And I made it very clear that for those that are into watches, this was a bracelet watch, so the links are short on it. It wasn't fully linked. And I made that very clear. The watch sat on the marketplace for a couple months until it eventually sold in June. And before purchasing the watch, the buyer asked a bunch of questions. Does the bracelet fit? How do I get more links? This and that. Answered everything to his, to his satisfaction. And then he deposited the money in escrow. Chrono24 works via a secure escrow platform. So he did a full deposit of the entire value of the watch into escrow, which triggers an email for me as the seller to ship out the watch.
Sure.
So I packaged it up, I overnighted it. He gets it, and the way the escrow works is the buyer has 7 days to make a contest to the escrow. So if I were to ship him a rock, for example, or a non-running watch, he would have time to go against it. Usually, people in my previous experiences selling there, they release it immediately. But
Right.
I noticed I shipped the watch to him. It arrived. A day went by, no release. Another day went by, no release. Third day went by, nothing. And then Monday, first thing, I get an email first thing in the morning saying the user has disputed your sale. And now here's me wondering, what could possibly be wrong with the watch? I took lots of good photos. I was very meticulous in my description. So I read his refund request where
And
he
what was
said,
the request? What did he say?
that's what really got to me. It was very generic. It said something along the lines of, hello, the item is not as pictured, and please let me know how to return it. And now I'm starting to think, if you're gonna buy a $20,000 watch off of a website, you don't say, oh, the item, right? Like you would have something more specific to say. So at the beginning, that was my first red flag. The website had urged me, why don't you deal with him and you come to a resolution, which again, I also didn't like. Like, it's your marketplace. Why is it between me and someone you connected me to? So I reached out to him and I said, hey, what's wrong, basically? Because another thing important to mention is as a private seller, I'm not obligated to take returns on Chrono24. Dealers are, but private sellers, no. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, what's wrong with the watch? And he repeats the same thing. Item doesn't look as pictured, and it doesn't have enough links on the bracelet. Now imagine my surprise hearing that when I had a full conversation with him about that a few days prior. So I sent all the screenshots over to Chrono24, and they did actually rule in my favor. They called me back and they said, hey, you're good. The guy is not within his rights. He said, it's kind of clear he's either just had, buyer's remorse or he's acting in bad faith, but we're not going to let him return the watch to you. We're going to reopen the escrow, and now it's the same deal again. He has 2 weeks to accept it. And if he doesn't in 2 weeks, I'll get an automatic deposit. So I asked them very clearly, I remember, so I'm good, right? I'm going to get paid out. They said, yeah, it might take up to 2 weeks, but you're going to get paid out. And that's where everything went crazy from there onwards. So I waited a few days, nothing. No email, no correspondence. And then I suddenly get an email back from Chrono24 saying, and I got excited. I see, email from Chrono24. Nice, I'm getting paid.
Right.
And I log in and it's, the user has filed a credit card chargeback.
Which, how can you do that with an escrow?
Right. Does that not defeat the purpose of an escrow? Right. I mean, if you were buying a house where you use escrow, you'd think the realtor would let you put the money for that on a credit card? No, that's the whole purpose of escrow. So I wrote back to them and I was livid. I was like, what do you mean? Like, isn't the whole purpose of this to be secure? And they're like, yeah, but, he did it via credit card and created a chargeback. And at this point, they were basically just like, yeah, we have to freeze the escrow account. And I said, how long? And they said indefinite until we hear back from the purchaser's credit card company. The escrow account will remain frozen basically until an action is ruled upon by the credit card provider. So I said, how long does this take on average? And she said, usually we wrap these up in 30 to 45 days,
Right.
which again, is really frustrating. It's a lot of money. I'm not a dealer. I'm just a guy who likes watches. I
Sure.
buy and sell. So for me, this was a huge amount of money. For most people, I would think $20,000 is a lot of money. So I told them, I said, look, I appreciate it, but I have bills to pay. Like, I sold the watch for a reason, I don't. So they were like, yeah, sorry, we can't help. It's going to take 30 to 45 days. All we can do is send our chat logs and our evidence to them, and it's just up to them to deal with it. Which led to just weeks upon weeks upon weeks of me reaching out. Hey, what's the update? Sorry, we haven't heard anything. Hey,
So
what's
it
the
went
update?
past the 30 to 45 days.
Yeah, just about after we hit, I don't remember the date exactly, but just about like the 30 to 45 day mark, somewhere in that range. It had now come to about August of
Okay.
2023. And I reached out to them. I should backtrack a little and mention, they told me, they said, even if they lose the Amex dispute, they will pay me out. They told me that at the beginning. Chrono24 said, hey, not to worry. I know it's a long wait. It might take some time, but one way or another, you're going to get paid.
Right.
So now we circle back to 30 to 45 days post dispute. And I just sent them an email because I was frustrated at this point. I said, look, you had agreed to pay me out one way or another. This ultimately is between you and the credit card processor. So pay me out
Right.
and you deal with the situation. They said, yeah, we'll get back to you.
Because
A little late.
$20,000 to them is a lot of money too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I told them, like, and I made that clear. I said, look, even if this was a $200-300 purchase, it would be bad. But $20,000, like, that's life-changing money for some people. For me, I needed the money.
Right.
So I told them, I said, this is a big part of like my finances. I need this sorted. And eventually, so they said, yeah, we'll get back to you. I get a call a little later. I think it was a few days after that, and at this point, I have their number saved on my phone. So I see ringing Chrono24 support, and I answer it, and I'm excited. I'm like, oh, maybe like, we've reached a resolution. It's been, it's now mid-August. This thing happened late June.
Right.
So they answer, and I immediately hear it in her voice. My mediator, she said, look, I pushed this up the chain to my supervisor. We're no longer able to have your back in case in case we lose the dispute.
Oh, wow.
And my jaw hit the floor. I said, what do you mean? I mean, you had told me, and this was my mistake. I should have written it down. But I should have asked for a written confirmation. But
Right.
I will say, to their credit, she did admit it. She said, I did say that. I know I said that. But after pushing it up to my boss, legally, this constitutes friendly fraud, not wire fraud. And in my mind, I was like, that doesn't sound very friendly to me. I mean,
Right.
the guy has my watch. And if you've ever done a chargeback on Amex before, I've done it. Like, Amex pays you up front, and
Right.
then they decide to take it back or not. I got scammed once on a taxi ride, and I did it, and I got the full statement back. So at this point, the guy has $20,000. The guy has my watch, and I have neither. So I told them that this doesn't sound like something friendly to me.
No,
And she was like,
and just for the viewers, I want you to continue on, but just for the viewers,
Sure.
friendly fraud. It's also called third-party fraud. That's the better name for it. But friendly fraud is basically, traditionally, it's been when you've got an existing legitimate customer that comes to your website. So Walmart, Sam's Club, Amazon, what have you. It's somebody who's actually a legitimate customer that comes there, and for some reason, they decide that they're going to try to benefit at the harm of the company. So they'll get that item in, they'll say, hey, it was messed up, it was torn up, it wasn't in the box, what have you. And that's that instance of friendly fraud at that point, all right? So what Chrono24 was saying is they're saying, hey, this is not some sort of scheme. It's nothing that's organized. It's some user that's just trying to profit. And because of that, we are not going to get your back. You are going to potentially lose that $20,000. So I just wanted to explain that for the users that are out there, or the viewers rather.
At which point I asked them, I said, okay, so what's the deal? What's going to happen? My mediator, she told me, she said, we could do one of two things. We can carry on carrying on, with this case, or we could request your watch back from the user.
Right.
And that's when I lost it. I mean, you're a watch guy yourself. You know this. Certain watches, they take a long time to sell.
Right.
You know, certain watches, not every watch is a hype piece. Not every watch is, a Rolex Daytona. Not every watch is. And, this watch, it was an AP Royal Oak, but it was a specific version of it that's a bit, you have to really love it to love it. And I did, so I explained to them, I said, okay, if I were to get the watch back, there's two things here. It's been 2 months since this has happened. I don't know what the condition of the watch is. The guy could have replaced parts on it. He could have sent me back a fake watch. That's one thing. Secondly, remember I listed the watch in February and I didn't get a buyer until June.
Right.
So do I want to spend another half of a year trying to sell this? Not to mention, if people who follow the watch market, it's been on a downturn lately.
It has. Those Rolexes are going down. It's bringing everyone else down too.
Exactly. So I said, what about the depreciated value? I mean, I sold it for a certain amount on your platform. I should get that amount, because it was a handshake. It was a done deal.
Right.
They basically said, no, we'll either get you the watch back or the money, one of the two. And I said, look, humor me for a second. What if you guys lose the dispute and you can't have him return me the watch? What happens at that point? There was a bit of a silence, and then bluntly she just said, then, you would have to seek legal action against this user on your own. And I had no words at this point. I said, so I'll be out my watch, I'll be out my money, and then I'll be out, a 5-digit sum and getting a lawyer to sue this person.
And you're not going to get the watch back anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to get the watch back. And you know how it works with a lawsuit. You wouldn't even get paid for forever. If you even do. I mean, the person could just say he has no assets. And then what do you do at that point, So I was really frustrated. And in my mediator's defense, I could hear that, she was also frustrated. I feel like, it took her by left field that she had to tell me this news as well. But she was like, look, I'm really sorry. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm not taking it back. We're going to keep on fighting this case.
Right.
So at that point, I hung up off the phone and I let it sit for a few days. What happened next was truly a blessing in disguise for me. I one day, about a week later, if I remember correctly, about a few days to a week later, I decided, why don't I go on Chrono24 and I look up my reference number. I want to make sure that the value's not depreciated that much. If it has, then I can make a stronger case to them. Hey, I sold it for this amount in June. Now it's worth 7,000 less. So that was my idea. Lo and behold, the first result when I search in my model number is my watch.
The first result.
The first result, yeah. And
how did you know it was your watch?
The guy didn't even bother changing the photos. They were my photos, watermark and all, picture number and all at the bottom. It says 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4. And I could see my desk in the background. I could see my my office chair. They were my photos. And for those who don't know, Chrono24 also requires you to upload 2 photos of the watch at a certain time. To verify you own it. So the first 4 photos were my photos, and the last 2 were just really crappy photos he took in his bathroom or something with the time set. So at this point, I scrolled down to make sure it was the same guy, and lo and behold, the location, the purchase location, was the same. So it was
the username the same, or had he changed usernames?
So Chrono24 doesn't show you the username or user feedback as a buyer, but it tells you the location, and the town and state were exactly the same. And there's I shipped the watch to the guy. I know his shipping address. So it matched. So it was 4 a.m. at this point, and I called Chrono24 livid. Their main office is in Germany, so someone did answer because it was 10 a.m. there. And I told them, how could you miss this? This is your whole job is to wouldn't you think that if a user, they admitted to me that the guy is acting in bad faith. They admitted that he's committing fraud. So wouldn't you, I don't know, monitor his account?
Right.
Wouldn't you keep tabs on what he's doing? And they were like, oh, we're so sorry. They were like, oh, we don't have an image matching algorithm yet. I said, forget about that. All you have to do is monitor his account or ban him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so
then,
and just I want you to continue again. You're absolutely right. I mean, this okay, we don't have image matching. Okay, you may not. First of all, I don't believe that. All right, but I know they've got device matching. I know they're able to compare IPs. I know they're able to look at shipping locations and addresses and things like that.
right.
And let's be clear, where are you going to sell that watch? You're going to sell it one of two places. It's going to go up on My Watch Mart or Chrono24. If you want that dollar amount, it's going on Chrono24. That's where it's going. So
Right.
this is ridiculous. And for them to admit that they knew that the user was committing fraud against you and then say, hey, tough, which is basically what they said. That's
Right.
crazy.
They were, and to when I brought it up, when I said that, like, this is ridiculous, like, why am I doing your job for you? I thought you were supposed to have my back, I not me have your back, right? And they told me, so sorry, it slipped through the cracks, we didn't realize. And within like 20 minutes after my mediator logged on, so about 10 a.m. in America, they banned his account. Like, I had the listing saved and everything, of course. I took all the screenshots, I still have them.
Right.
And then I saw, like, because it was under my saved watches. I went there and it says this listing is no longer available.
Okay.
So then my mediator calls me and she says, hey, we're really, really sorry about that. I'm really sorry. Like, we should have caught that, this and that. And then essentially they were like, the one thing we could tell you is that this will look very good for our case against Amex, our case regarding this purchase. Because if the watch has been disputed because something's wrong with it, then how is he selling it on the same platform?
Right.
Because clearly now there's nothing wrong with it that you're selling it. So, that was the nail in the coffin. The sad part is, if I hadn't found that, I might have still not been paid for the watch.
You wouldn't have been paid. Let's be clear. What happened is Chrono24, they knew that they were going to lose that chargeback, and they were. So they just decided to cut their losses, screw you over, and then they stopped looking at the case altogether. And honestly, dude, I mean, you were fortunate, lucky. I mean, fortune favors the bold, whatever you want to say. But for you to just decide to take a look is really the only thing that saved you at that point in time.
Right. About 10 days after that, I got an email saying that Amex did resolve in my favor because they submitted that evidence to Amex. And at that point, like, Amex is known to favor the customer.
Right.
But, like, they are fair, like, at the end of the day, they can see when something is fraud.
Right.
I later on found out, come like a few weeks after this got closed, or maybe 10 days, again, I'm not quite sure, but I checked on eBay and I saw he had also listed my watch on eBay. And get this, I've never in my life seen somebody with 0% positive feedback.
I have.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
He had 11 transactions and still an average of 0% positive feedback.
Right.
And there was like a review. He sold an iPhone or something to someone that was fake, so clearly he was trying to go up a tax bracket with his fraud. But
clearly.
The problem that he didn't account for is when people are defrauded for $100, $200, people are upset. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's happened to me, but this is someone's livelihood. When you're dealing with a 5-figure amount, you're dealing with a big chunk of someone's assets.
You are. It's like that what you said there reminds me of what Hans Gruber says on Die Hard, Christmas movie, but he says, if you steal $400, no one comes to look at you. If you steal $4 billion or $400 million, everyone comes to find you at that point. Right. There's a big difference in that, a huge difference. And I read your story. And as I was reading it, I was like, Jesus, I mean, and it's this refund fraud. And I want to walk through some of that with you so that, the different viewers can understand how this operates. I'm going to show some Telegram stuff as we go along as well. So what happens is the way that fraud started back in 2013 is you would claim that the package never arrived. And that still works to a degree. It was so successful back then that today, when Amazon delivers a package or even when UPS delivers a package, a lot of the time they take a snapshot, a picture, a photo of the package on the porch. And that was only because of all the refund fraud that was going on at that point in time. And back then it only hit Amazon, but today it hits really every single merchant that's out there that can be hit with it. Over time, though, because of the way that companies were trying to defeat that fraud, the did not arrive excuse, the different ways that the fraud was committed changed. And one of the ways it changed is that fraudsters would claim, well, yeah, I got the box, but the item was not in the box. Yeah, the retail box is here, or they would order a few different items, and the most expensive item would not be in the box. And that excuse tends to work today as well. There's a new technique that comes out, though, and it's called FTID, fake tracking identity. And what that is I can manipulate the return shipping label. And this is what I think was going to happen with you. The guy wanted to return the item, and I really think that at that point, he was thinking that you were going to accept the return. He was going to manipulate the return label to make it look like you received the return, but you never did. And at that point, he could claim, yes, the seller actually absolutely received the watch back. I've got proof that shows that. But what you did is you said, hey, I'm not going to accept the return. At that point, what fraudsters do, the only fallback they've got if they really want to keep the item is to do a chargeback. And that's exactly what these forums and Telegram channels, they teach at that point. Now, the other thing that's going on these days is we have these things called insiders. There are insiders at DHL, UPS, and FedEx that are paid off, and they're pretty common these days, especially during Christmas. They're paid off to lose the items so that it looks like it's always consistently in shipping, that it's lost at station, what have you. Meanwhile, the buyer gets his item, the seller gets ripped off of money, or the platform itself gets ripped off of money if the platform decides that they're going to actually support the sellers. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not just Chrono24 that pulls this. We've seen it happen on Walmart's platform, on Target's platform, on eBay, a slew of different sellers that or platforms that allow PayPal transactions. And a matter of fact, we've got a screenshot here that talks about some of the stuff that takes place with this refunded fraud. And this here says, we're selling services for creating shipments according to your labels from Amazon and others, including labels for returning received from sellers, UPS, USPS, FedEx, DHL. If you'll scroll on down, Brian, we'll get to where I'm really interested in going. Okay, right here we go. An example of the scope of this service: Refund, Amazon, and other sites, 100% confirmation of payment, 100% win in PayPal dispute, 100% waste of PayPal funds, cash outflow on eBay. And then down here at the bottom, we've got your best partner to successfully doing PayPal chargeback flips and Amazon and eBay scams. So what's happening is it's all organized. It's not friendly fraud. The idea of it being friendly fraud is just an excuse that platform, in this case Chrono24, is using in order to say, hey, because it's friendly fraud, our system doesn't secure you against that. They know good and well that it's not just friendly fraud. This is organized. And as a matter of fact, I went on Telegram, because Telegram is now the Wild West of cybercrime. So this channel, I have done a search for refunds Rolex. Those were the keywords. This channel is RR Activity for Rolls-Royce Activity, and they do refunding for whoever may want to do it. So you take someone that they want to watch, whether it be an AP or a Rolex or maybe the Omega Paris Olympic watch Seamaster that's out. They don't want to pay for it. They want their money back. So you take that Rolex Daytona. Maybe it's going for the white gold. I saw one today for $39K. So they want the watch, but they don't want to spend $39K. But they're not confident enough to fake the tracking label themselves, or to claim it didn't arrive, or to claim it wasn't in the box, or anything else like that. So what you can do is you can go to Telegram, you can find a channel like RR Activity, and you can pay them a % of the order total to get your money back for you, and you get to keep the item. Okay? So they'll do it using an insider, they'll fake tracking information, or as you saw, 4K1, with that excuse. The item is not as pictured, not as described. And there's a very specific reason for that. If you claim that the item is not as described, it sets you up to do a chargeback if you need to, because that not as described, that not as described is an actual chargeback reason. Okay?
That makes sense. It sounded very much like a script, you know?
Right, it is. It absolutely is.
Interesting.
Okay, so this is just one channel, and you see here you've got he'll refund you for Home Depot. They've got Skims. Here's Williams Sonoma, Sam's Club, and it tells you the dollar amount that you can order. So if you're wanting to defraud Sam's Club, it's $5,000 order total, 3 items. Is the most you can order. They're going to charge you 25% of whatever the order total is, a minimum of $250, and they guarantee an instant refund. So you get your items in, you pay the 25%, and you immediately, and by immediately they mean within 24 hours, you get your money back.
That's insane. I can't believe this is organized to, like, you know, you could essentially do this with anything then.
Anything.
Wow.
Anything. So, and to give you an idea, let's search for Chrono24 and see what pops up. AIO Crime Channel, all in one crime, 9,869 members. All right. And right here, we've got somebody that says, hey, if anyone has refunded Chrono24 before, message me ASAP. I will pay you for your orders.
What's the date on that? I'm curious now.
The date on this, let's see, that goes back to 2022. So that's the initial response. Back in 2022, people are looking for how to do that. So obviously, someone found a way to do that and do that successfully and profitably. And what happens is someone wants a watch. Typically, they look for Rolexes. But the thing about Telegram, most fraudsters, and here's where you come in, most fraudsters right now are wanting AP, and they all love Royal Oak. So someone saw that and they're like, hey, I can get me an AP. And you messed things up because you said, hey, I'm not going to go with a refund. Well, what these channels teach you is, hey, if a seller refuses to refund you, do a chargeback. Get the money back. You may lose the chargeback, but what happens is you get the money back and you immediately shut down the account. So if I paid by debit or something like that, I get the money back. I close the account down, take all of my money out. So that way, if the platform, if they win the chargeback, I still get to keep the money and the product at the end of the day.
What you're saying is making a lot of sense, especially about the choice of watch. Mine was the model number of AP I had. It is the most, technically the most affordable Royal Oak. Okay. So the guy was probably like, oh yeah, I want a Royal Oak. This is the cheapest Royal Oak I can buy, and get away with it. That's absurd. It's a lot of things are clicking into place now. Like the guy never used his name, for example. Right. He used his business address, which is a real company, by the way. It's a real company. I won't say where, but it's a real company. It's a real business with Google reviews and everything. But you know, this is America. It's pretty easy to find more information. So I found out who he is and all that stuff, and that makes a lot of sense because usually. You wouldn't. I've dealt on this platform many times, and nobody has ever used their company name before. Right. You know, especially for an item of that much value, or they'll put like their company name care of their own name.
Exactly. And matter of fact, I bought the last watch that I bought from off Chrono. I got the Grand Seiko, the Godzilla was what I got.
Yeah, that's a nice
beautiful watch. It's a beautiful watch, and it was a pretty penny too. And no, I used my real name. I didn't. I've got a company, but I didn't use that because you don't use your company name when you do that.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And that's another thing. It's all linked to his business now. You know, he used his business information, which I don't know that was the smartest idea, but you know, his company's a real company with reviews that offers a real service. That's the surprising part to me. That it seems like this guy was kind of new to it. I think he was. And which is also why he made the fatal flaw of listing it himself in the middle of the chargeback.
Right. And here's the thing: you're taught, these channels tell you not to do that. So if you're defrauding Amazon or Apple, if you get that Apple or Samsung product in, you're not supposed to open it. You're not supposed to use it until everything is finished. You're not supposed to try to resell it until that transaction is complete all the way. This guy, I guess, because he was, it's a $20,000 watch. He's sitting there going, hey, I need to sell this thing now. That way I can make the money back and I can continue to bankroll more and more fraud as it goes along, is exactly what he's thinking. So he went against what they teach on these Telegram channels. He absolutely did. My thing, what really surprises me more than anything is that you said it at the beginning when we started to talk. Chrono24 positions itself as a secure site for buyers and sellers. That's exactly the reason that I use it. Is they've got the escrow there. You're taught that, hey, the watch is going to arrive, and you're guaranteed as a buyer, you're guaranteed that it's going to be in the type of condition that it's being sold as. And as a seller, you're guaranteed that, hey, because it's escrow, we've got your back. And your story absolutely 100% proves that no, they don't have your back. They've got their back.
Right. It's a shame, really, because if you want a watch that, as you know, you can't just go into the AD and buy most watches these days. Right. So if you want to watch, people will either go to Chrono24 or eBay or something. This sort of really shook me up a little. Like, if I'm going to sell a watch now, and I don't do it very frequently, only when I need to.
Sure.
And if I was to do it now, I would just sell it direct to a dealer. I would take the hit. I would sell it direct to a dealer. They're not going to give you as much money, but you're going to get wired immediately. There's not going to be any of this funny business. It's, also, I'm not sure if you read the comments on the post. Did you read the story that one of the commenters posted about how he had a similar experience at Chrono24?
I did.
That was along the lines of this. They sent back a rock in the box.
Right.
And they said that he did that
too. As long as the weight is there, you can send back whatever you want to, and then you dispute it from there. And as you pointed out, companies like Amex, they tend to favor the buyer, not the seller. Certainly that's taught with PayPal. PayPal always favors the buyer. So and this year, to give you an idea, I am a former felon. I was a guy that was a cyber criminal, and today I work in cybersecurity. I really work hard to try to protect individuals and businesses from that type of person that I used to be. I've worked this year I've assisted in the arrest of over 300 of these refund fraudsters. 300. Wow. But you've got to consider that we're talking about millions of cyber criminals across the planet. So it sounds like a lot of people, but it's not. And they're taught. Some of the cases that we worked with, one guy was sending back plastic frogs instead of those electronics that he had stolen. That's what he was sending. But the weight was right. So this is some of the things that they're taught. I wanted to bring you on because there are a lot of sellers on Chrono24. There are a lot of buyers there, but there's a lot of sellers there. And if you think that you're protected, you're not protected. You're not. That buyer, depending on the payment instrument that's being used, that buyer can absolutely, if he wants to commit fraud against you, can absolutely institute, at the end of the day, can institute, if he's not able to do refunding fraud, he can do a chargeback.
Right.
Keep the watch, get his money back at the same time. And that is a horrible, nightmarish type scenario that pops up, especially when you've got a platform that is not supporting you as a seller.
And that's an inherent flaw in their whole secure escrow. They market it as secure escrow.
Right.
But what's the purpose of an escrow if someone can just pull out of it? Isn't that the whole point of an escrow?
Exactly.
Like, I posed that question to them and they didn't have an answer. I mean, if you're going to take secure escrow, you should require either debit, ACH, wire, or a check, something like that.
And that really is what needs to happen. We need Chrono24. Right now, that escrow is simply a marketing tool. That's the only thing it is. If they want to be serious about it, it should be up to the seller to decide how that escrow is funded. And the seller should always choose ACH or debit is what that seller should choose.
That's what I would have done had I the choice.
Right.
That's why there's a lot of watch trading groups on Facebook of like dealers who buy and sell, or individuals, and they all require wire only.
Right.
The terms are, you can, like, the money is a lot, like they're a lot cheaper than on Chrono24 or other places, but it's always wire only.
Right. Because that is the most secure and safest for the seller. It absolutely is.
Right. And if, they do any shenanigans with the wire, that's now wire fraud.
Right.
Which is, a whole nother story. Exactly.
And, Chrono24, I don't believe they don't have the ability to compare pictures. I absolutely think they do. And I've done cybersecurity for a while now. I absolutely think they do. I know that they can compare devices. They can compare IP ranges coming in, browser fingerprints. They can look at the biometrics, the behavioral biometrics of the users, so they know that this person was active, was trying to resell the watch, everything else. The problem is that they decided not to look at those things. That's right. The issue. For sellers out there, what advice, after your experience, what advice would you give potential sellers or active sellers that are on Chrono24 right now?
I would say try to see if there's a way, if you can ask that support, like you said, if you can guarantee wire only. I know dealers, there's an option there that you can make it so that rather than using the escrow system, you can pay by wire.
Right.
So I would recommend that people do that. I fell for the marketing. I thought, secure escrow. In theory, it sounds great.
Right.
I would suggest not to do that. Secondly, one thing that really saved me is I took all the screenshots. In the end, Chrono24 still had it on their record on their side. But if they really don't want to help you, they can just say they don't have a record of it.
Right.
So I took all the screenshots of everything. And I also even took a photo of the watch as I packed it up to ship it. Just because I'm a bit paranoid like that. I can see that I don't know that would have helped in the end. They could have just said I could have just taken it out of the box and shipped something else. But I just like to dot my I's and cross my T's. I would say just act as if you're going to get scammed. Act with as much caution as you can, especially when you're selling a high dollar item. And like I said, I've sold a few times on Chrono24 before with similar scale too. And
right.
Both times worked fine. But I also exercised diligence. I sort of went through the guy's account, went through his messages. Did anything feel right? Did anything feel wrong? In this case, the questions he asked me about the bracelet and all that at the beginning, it all looked legit.
Sure.
The guy did seemingly have like all these questions. He did seemingly like they made sense. Okay, where do I get more links? Where do I, how do I do this? And I answered everything. So it seemed like a legitimate customer. It really did. He negotiated with me on the price too, which is funny because when he relisted it, he added $1,000 to the price. So not only was he trying to scam me, he was also trying to turn a profit.
Well, and I want you to understand that the bargaining, the questions, what that's meant from a criminal, and I used to be one. What you're doing there as a criminal is you're layering trust with that potential victim. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make you think that everything is legitimate across the board. That way, when it comes time to defraud you, it becomes much more difficult for you to fight that.
You're building a sort of air of legitimacy.
That's
like,
it. That's it.
I'm an actual customer. I'm curious about your product. I also, the other thing that bothered me is that they told me from the beginning that, it seems like this guy's acting in bad faith. Whether that or not, or even if he just had buyer's remorse, that's still against their policy. So they told me they would take action against his account. And here I was 2 months later finding his account list the watch.
Well, they didn't want to lose $20,000.
Right. Yeah. Which also, I get it. $20,000 for them is a lot of money, but they are the most heavily transacted upon watch site in the world.
Absolutely.
People sell watches there that are in the millions, hundreds of thousands. Right. If that had happened to somebody like that, like selling a item that expensive, I don't even want to imagine.
Right.
I'm privileged to say that as $20,000 was very difficult, but in the end, I could have found a way to pick myself up. I can't imagine if I was selling something that was worth 120,000, 115,000, something like that, my entire life savings, imagine.
Right.
And you could very well lose it all. Like the guy in the comments of my post, he lost it all. He lost the watch and the money.
Right.
So,
and that is the goal from a criminal side. When you're looking at these Telegram channels, that is the goal. In order to, you want to keep the product and you want your money back. And I've got to be honest with you, they don't give a damn about the victim. They don't.
It's sad to hear that. I mean, like at the end of the day, we are real people out here.
Right.
You know, and you shouldn't defraud anybody, of course. But when you're doing this, it's not a victimless crime.
Right.
Some people seem to act like it is. Oh, I just got a refund. Somebody's going to have to pick up the check at the end of the day. And in this case, it was almost me.
It was. I mean, and that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Is there anything that you want to ask me about the way this crime is committed or anything like that or not?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how long has this existed, this organized? You mentioned since 2013 is when it started with Amazon. But with these Telegram channels, like, how long has this existed? Like, how many people know about it? I didn't realize this was such a commonplace thing.
Sure. So the fraud itself started to pop up around 2013. Telegram as a fraud channel or a platform really started to come into play after. So what happens is 2017, Alphabay was the largest criminal marketplace at that point in time. Law enforcement shuts it down. Law enforcement also shut down another marketplace called Hansa Market at the same time. That caused such paranoia on the traditional dark web that criminals started to look at other platforms. They actually started to move to Reddit at that point in time, and you have a lot of fraud channels or subreddits taking place. Reddit let it happen because it was a very good honeypot for law enforcement, and they let it go for about 6 months. Then they started to shut everything down. What happens at that point is back on the traditional dark web, which you have to use the Tor browser to access. We had Dread pop up, which is now the Reddit of the dark web. But a lot of the criminals that were out there, they started to look at smaller encrypted messaging channels like Wicker, Signal, WhatsApp, places like that. Along 2018, 2019. Telegram pops up, and Telegram is, as I don't know if you use Telegram or not, but it's encrypted end to end. It's owned by a Russian, which the Russian does not answer any request for law enforcement at all. And at the same time, it's very easy to use. So if you use Tor, for example, you don't have a search engine. You have to know where you're going. If you're a criminal, you have to configure it properly or you're going to be identified and go to prison. At the same time, you've got criminals that are trying to defraud each other on the dark web. Telegram doesn't have any of that friction available. So it's very user-friendly. It is encrypted end to end. It has a keyword search function, as you saw me using just a few minutes ago. And because of that, now Telegram is the place for cybercrime. I showed you one channel. You've got hundreds, and I mean hundreds of refund channels with thousands upon tens of thousands of members there. The R&R channel that I showed has over 14,000 users. 14,000 for just one refunding service, and there are tons of them that are out there. What happens is you find a lot of them use the exact same stores. At Chrono24. I forgot some of the other ones. Sam's Club, Costco, Apple, Williams Sonoma, Lovesac. I mean, whatever you want, whatever product that you want, they can get it for you at 10. It's usually 10 to 15% of the retail price, depending on the amount or the store. Like, for example, someone advertised yesterday they had access to an insider that worked at Best Buy. And the dollar amount was unlimited. So you could order any number of items and any dollar amount, and they would charge you 40% of whatever the order total was, and you would get an instant refund. Within 24 hours, you'd get your money back and get to keep the items. That kind of stuff is common. And because of that, it's really destroying a lot of merchants and retailers. Like I work with a lot of camera merchants, for example. Camera merchants operate on a 2% margin. So you can imagine what that type of fraud would do to a mom and pop business that operates on a 2% profit margin. It would absolutely destroy
That's
it.
horrible.
But you're seeing the same thing. You know, you've put out $20,000 and you're trying to get that money back, and all of a sudden it's locked up for months as the platform doesn't support you, and that's a very common occurrence. We see it. It's eating people who use or sell using PayPal, for example. PayPal always goes on the side of the buyer. Always. Right. So what can happen is you get one of these refund fraudsters. They set up a PayPal account. They pay through PayPal. They get the item in, then they claim it didn't show up. PayPal almost always, 90% plus of the time, they will err on the side of the buyer, give the buyer the money back, screw over the seller. That's very common.
Let me ask you this. Let's imagine an alternate history where I lost the watch and I did lose the dispute.
Right.
Would I have any recourse at all via legal means or anything to get my money back?
None. You talked about taking them and suing them in court. The problem is that, yes, when these fraudsters start out, they use their real name. But as they get better at it, they don't. They use these things called synthetic profiles. So you're creating an artificial person in order to commit this fraud. So who are you going to sue? Nobody, because you can't find the person to sue anymore.
Right.
Okay.
I guess I was lucky this guy was at the beginning and hopefully the end of his scamming career.
You're very lucky. I'm going to tell you at the end, probably not. He found out that, hey, this works. I just need to be better at it next time.
So what happens to him now that Amex did not rule in his favor? Do they take any action against him when?
I'm glad you asked that. So doing chargebacks, how many chargebacks do you think it takes for a bank, a credit card issuer, to actually look at that account and see that there's a problem? You would think that, hey, 8, 9? No. Typically, it's somewhere in the 80s to 90s.
80s to 90s?
On a yearly basis.
Wow.
That's the issue.
That's absurd.
Absurd.
They don't take into account the dollar value?
No.
That is ridiculous. So you could do a chargeback, hypothetically, 3 times a year on a $40,000 to $50,000 purchase if you had a big enough credit limit, and they wouldn't think that was strange?
And not raise any flags.
That's insane.
Right. That's the issue.
Wow. I was hoping at least, that there would be some blowback on him for doing this, but I guess not. I guess he's just going to get better at it and try again.
Right. And Amex, he lost the chargeback. Maybe that causes them to look at it at that point. Maybe not. But if he's got an Amex card, he's probably got a Discover card. That's an easy card to get. He's probably got some Capital One, Visa, or MasterCards sitting around places like that. So he just goes right down the list and continues these types of fraud, whether it be Chrono24, Apple Store, what have you at that point. Absolutely.
I'll admit, you and your listeners will appreciate this. I was a bit exceptionally weary about this because I was in the process of taking my Security Plus exam at the same time.
Okay.
So I had just learned about fraud and cybercrime for months. I just took the exam in July. I passed it. Now I'm
glad you
Plus.
passed it, man.
That was a hard exam, but
well, look, since you're going through the security track, I am on LinkedIn. Look me up, Brett Johnson, and you can look Brett Johnson cybercrime. I talk about this bullshit all the time. All right, I'm adamant about trying to protect businesses and consumers, and that's why I wanted you to come on the show to give your personal story about what happened, because I think it's important. It's important that people understand that escrow does not always mean that you're protected. Absolutely not.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'll definitely look you up on LinkedIn. I'm happy I was able to be here and
absolutely.
Share this
Reach
story.
out to me, and I will continue to assist you in any possible way that I can. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I truly do appreciate it.
Sounds good. Appreciate being here. Best of luck.
Stay safe out there.
You too. Bye.
All right, so I want to thank again Reddit user 4K1 for coming on and sharing his story. As you can see, this kind of fraud, it just doesn't hit platforms and businesses. It hits individuals, and that's where it really matters. That's what causes a lot of damage that's out there. Not only that, but it really causes a lot of distrust on the platform. If you can't trust these websites you're going and buying or selling from, what happens at the end of the day? You don't use them. and everything starts to collapse over time. Take that in mind. Be aware this holiday season. We've got a lot of fraud that's out there. This is just one type of fraud that's occurring right now. I'm going to continue to talk about holiday season fraud on probably the next episode that airs as well. That being said, we're going to close things out. How do we close it out? The same way every single time, and this show should illustrate that. Stay safe out there. Stay secure. Stay vigilant. More importantly, this is Criminal Thoughts. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe out there.